All right. Hey guys, welcome back to the BBR podcast. I'm so honored to have in my home Jason Polk, otherwise known as the Denver relationship expert. How are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Thank you very much for joining me. I know that your time is valuable, so we'll try to get the most out of our short amount of time here. But heck, if it goes 6 hours, we'll probably have plenty to talk about. So thank you again for spending the time with me. But how did you get started in relationship coaching? And I saw you're a social worker, licensed social worker, is that correct? And another interesting fact is you're PACT trained, which we want to talk about a little bit later. But how and why did you get involved in counseling?
Yeah, well, great question. So I think like a lot of therapists was my own struggles, my own crap. Is it okay to?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to say shit.
So my own shit, basically. I was beating around the bush. I didn't know if it was cool.
It's all good. We're authentic here.
Okay, great. Growing up, just my own discomforts in my own skin led to me eventually using drugs, drinking a lot, and my initial recovery from them. And I was in my early 20s, I was starting to feel better about myself, and I was thinking, you know what, I want to help other people get some degree of comfort in their skin. And so that made me want to be a social worker. I wanted to be a teacher at first, but I was like, I don't want to go back to school, I don't really want to do that. And so social work called me.
Yeah, very cool. So from your childhood into your early 20s, you found a purpose and a passion early. Some men don't find their purpose and passion until later. Have you found that as like a common theme amongst your clients and patients?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really good question. So do men normally find their passion later in life?
Yeah, what I've been reading, David Data, The Way of the Superior Man, I just came across a quote. He does tend to repeat himself a lot, but I came across one section of the book early on that says, men move from purpose to purpose, and once they've fulfilled that first one, they move on. Like, we could talk about career. Career for me went from hotel restaurant until the 2008 crash and recession. I went back to school for exercise science, and then I started a personal training career, fulfilled that passion, did all that I wanted to do with it, and still continue to run that business, but then moved on to a new passion, which is now the podcast, which brings us here together today. Does that resonate?
It does. I guess my experience is that what I see more in my practice, or maybe this is more how I'm oriented, is that I feel like us males, we're raised to be self-assertive, we're raised to be tough, we're raised to be leaders, but we're not raised to be emotional, we're not raised to consider things like dependency, relationality. And so I find that more in my practice, maybe because I primarily focus on couples, is that in a way us men, we've cut off that emotional piece. And I know this doesn't resonate with what you're saying, so maybe my answer is no, I don't find it that much. No, that I'm thinking out loud, but in a way I see it, like a lot of my work is helping men get in touch with their emotional side. You can be tough, you can be burly and emotional.
I totally agree, and hopefully that's part of my process that I've gone through, is becoming emotionally aware, conscious, and available as well. Like if I understand who I am as an emotional being, but then never become available to a partner, then I'm going to end up in your office.
Yeah, for sure. And 9 times, well, not I would say 9 times, 6 times out of 10, the female partner in a straight couple drags the male in.
Because let's see, rock bottom is a very good motivator to get us to where we want to go.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Oftentimes, why we started this podcast around relationships is because relationships are where we find a lot of patterns arise.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, and I know you've, Dan, I've stalked your podcast. I say stalked, listened to, enjoyed your podcast, but I know even it might have been on your Instagram post too. You share, the attachment style of avoidance, and I think you said something like an avoidant in recovery or something like that.
Sure, recovering avoidant.
Recovering avoidant. Yeah, that's right. So anyway, I can resonate with that. But that's, like what you were talking about with our old stuff coming up. Once the initial phase of the relationship, the excitement phase is ended after about a year, then that stuff comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Like our attachment style, like you were saying, like our old patterns, they emerge.
Mm-hmm. And I went through a breakup, and I recognized past patterns coming up, and I'm like, well, it's my choice to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very hard choice to make, because we don't want to face our shadowy side.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think anybody does, and that's why men who are being drugged along by their feminine partner or their female partner is reluctant to do so, is because they don't want to face what's hiding there.
Yeah, great point. And what kudos to you, because the first step in the recovery process, right, is to acknowledge it. Is to face it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times, when I say men, I know we're being stereotypical here, but a lot of times us men were cut off. We don't even know that it's missing, that the emotionality is missing. We don't think anything's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like, our problem is our partner.
We're a little self-deluded there, aren't we?
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
Why is my partner nagging me all the time?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's because I'm not listening, or because I'm not conscious of what's there, what's present. And I went through the breakup, and I knew that we weren't going to get back together. I knew that in my heart and in my gut, because we had tried for 3.5 years to make it work. So it wasn't like I was being drugged along by my partner. I was being drugged along by my instincts and saying, like, I'm not happy with the same thing happening, just with a different named partner.
Yeah, awesome. So how did you, well, I don't know, I'm curious about you. I know your journey.
Let's talk.
Like, I mean, like, what do you do to fix that? When did the realization come? I don't know, just curious.
I went through a lot of different things in the past couple of years. So December 3rd was the ultimate breakup, the catalyst event that kind of inspired me to go back to counseling. But in between the May breakup and the December breakup, I spent a lot of time alone, really kind of reaffirming what my purpose was. So I dove back into work, which was the personal training business, which was the coaching of other personal trainers. I had 2 businesses at that time, and I started to see more success in my businesses because I was intentional again about pouring into that purpose. Not because I had let go of an anchor or anything like that. She was not dead weight. We actually grew a lot together. We just grew as far as we possibly could together, and then we chose to end it. So I spent time alone, and then I got into another short-term entanglement, is what I like to call it, but with a narcissist, unfortunately, which taught me more than anything else I could have ever learned. And that was the one thing that I didn't want to happen ever again. I did not want to experience the gaslighting. I didn't want to experience the mistrust. There was another person involved on her side, and I just never wanted to experience that again. So going
Good
to
for you, by the way.
by putting my foot down and finding some self-worth. So I chose to go to a counselor that I'd heard cognitive behavior therapy would be really good, and it resonated with me because I had a friend going through it at the time for eating disorder and some self-worth issues in her life. And we got together, we talked about it, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm in CBT for the right reasons. And the counseling was really like a springboard for me because I could bounce off ideas before I started dating again, and then once I got back to dating again, and then I think about 5 months after that second breakup is when we landed with the podcast, and I started to seek out other people who knew more than I did, who were willing to share their ideas and their tips and their tools with me. And here we are, a year and a half later.
Awesome. So if you don't mind me asking, like, maybe like a secret motive of the podcast for you is to show up better in relationships?
Well, that's actually like the number one
number
goal.
one, not the secret. Okay. Yeah.
I'm very transparent about, like, I didn't know shit about relationships. I had learned a lot about myself through the Enneagram and through counseling a couple of times in my life, but I didn't know enough about what I was doing when I was in a relationship that was repeating the patterns. So it became more of like this, not a destination because I'll never be there, but this path to authenticity through self-awareness and personal discovery, which has been transformational through all different types of avenues. Journaling, reading, Audible, podcasts, speaking to experts, and then most recently, neurolinguistic programming has been like the tipping point for me to get out of my head, eliminate past patterns, and kind of rewrite the computer program that our brains act like.
That's awesome. In my journey as a couples therapist, kind of similar. Like I wanted to, at the time I was coming off a divorce, and so at the time I was confused, depressed, and it was like, how could such like a strong relationship in the beginning like end up like that, crash and burn? And that was part of my motivation for becoming a couples therapist, just like you. I wanted to know why. I wanted to be a better partner, because like haven't been naturally good at relationships, right? And
I think it's a learned skill.
Yeah,
I
sure.
don't know if it's like our innate ability and our instincts actually like guide us to that point, because in our lives we can have our internal guide, and it brings us to a point when we meet somebody else that we want to be with, but then they also have their own life as well. And now we're trying to kind of slowly overlap those, but not too much so that we become codependent,
for sure.
or too invested in the other person's life that we forget about ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it's tough.
So you've asked me plenty of questions. I've got some questions for you. You said you work primarily with couples, and that's why I wanted to talk about PACT. So PACT is a technique and a type of therapy that you chose, and why, and briefly explain what PACT is.
Yeah, so here's the story. And so at the time, I was a therapist, and my ex-wife and I, we were doing our own therapy. And so we got to a point where towards the end of our relationship, we saw a therapist who was trained in PACT. And from my perspective, I felt like we were actually getting somewhere, but it was too little too late. And so, again, after that, I reflected on the divorce, and I was thinking, I want to help people avoid similar situations. And so I didn't seek out PACT per se. I asked our couples therapist how he got trained, and he told me. And so I was like, cool, all right, I'll do it.
And what does PACT stand for?
So it stands for the psychobiological approach to couples therapy.
Okay.
And so a lot of PACT is the basic premise the best way to explain it is that PACT understands that fundamentally we are nervous systems, that fundamentally we are animals per se, and it is really big on helping each other manage each other's nervous systems in the moment, through learning techniques, touch, or things like leading with empathy, knowing our partner's attachment styles and fears, and being able to provide relief to each other. And I would say too, the basic premise for doing it, I know that may sound a little codependent, like, oh gosh, I'm relying on my partner to take care of me, but a different way of looking at it is that I am helping my partner succeed, and I'm conveying that it's safe and secure with me. At the very least, I'm not going to keep pushing my partner's fears and vulnerabilities. And so PACT say saying in PACT is have your partner's owner's manual. And so in a way, I know what makes my partners tick. I also know what makes my partner feel loved and appreciated. I know that was kind of long-winded.
No, the longer the better.
Okay.
And what I'm hearing is that we're, through PACT, understanding more about our partner so that we and ourselves can be understood, but also so that we can relate better to another person. And you said nervous system. Could that be like an energy field or an energy system as well, like bouncing back and forth between the two of you?
Yeah, I mean, whatever it is, like basically in PACT, you're interested in your other partner. You're interested in how their reactions, their micro expressions, we say. For example, if I come home and I say, hey dear, I won the lottery, and I notice that my partner's face goes south, it's my work to at least be interested in that. Instead of saying something like, oh, come on, be happy, I won the lottery, what's your deal? Right?
So could you ask them, hey, I've seen like a body language shift in you. Do you wanna talk about that, or did I make you uncomfortable, or how would you phrase that?
Yeah, so that's good. So it's a good story my wife always tells. So after the PACT training, I came home and I was talking to my wife and I'm like, oh, there's a micro expression right there. There's a micro expression. She was like, oh my God, stop with that stupid therapist shit, you know? And so you have to do it in a way that's not annoying, right?
Okay.
So for me, it's kind of more of like a mental note.
Okay.
We're like, hey, I'm curious, you know, I noticed something happened there, or there was a change, and, you know, like, I have to be conscious not to speak therapist around my wife because it really annoys her. So sometimes I'll know, like, hey, you know, like, you seem a little bit sad. Is that true, or something like that?
Okay.
And that, from my perspective, and I think even my wife shares too, that helps her out.
Okay, so you came at it with compassion, or you're taught to come at it with compassion as opposed to just like pointing out the sign that you saw physically, maybe spoken words or emotionally, something changed. Okay, so approach it a little bit more compassionately.
Yeah, for sure.
As opposed to like pragmatically and like, all right, let's fix.
Yeah, and in a way, another way of becoming interested in your partner is to know if you're talking and you've lost your listener, take note of that and do something else. Right? You know, or if you notice that your partner is shutting down or you're not getting through, stop. And one thing in PACT too that we help couples with is to understand the benefits of body language, of non-threatening touch. That can really go a long way to get your partner back into the social engagement window, where you're more likely to have a productive conversation. So another way of doing it, like PACT, we try to keep our partner and us on the play mat, both engaged, both receptive, so we're more likely to have a productive conversation. And also too, you know, there's really cool stuff, like PACT is really big into eye contact. And when we maintain eye contact, Stan Tacken, the founder of PACT, says that oxytocin is being released, so it can also be very calming for us. The eyes can not only be calming, they can also be stimulating at the same time. So in my office, I always have couples turn and face each other and connect with each other in the eyes. And to have important conversations when you're face-to-face, eye to eye. So you're more likely to have a productive conversation.
I get it. Yeah, I get it. Like, even in our conversation now, if people are watching on YouTube, they'd see us facing each other, not facing the camera, which is more genuine and more authentic. So now that we've talked a little bit about PACT, because I was very curious about it, other guests have talked about PACT before, and never really had somebody specifically practicing it with their couples. But common themes in our community are fear of rejection in relationships. Why is that so prevalent in dating today, or in relationships today?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like initial reaction that comes to my mind, and this is some of, you remember Esther Perel?
I love her, yeah.
Okay, so I'm reading her book, State of Affairs.
Okay.
And something that was interesting that came up for me, it's like modern relationships, it's almost like there's so much more at stake. It's almost like our relationships, we want them to be, the partner to be our best friends, to some degrees be our therapist, to also be our intimate lover, or our sexual lover. And it's almost like we put so much stock in there, you know, we put so much in that relationship. And that's why she says affairs are pretty difficult for modern day Americans, in her theory, is more so than in the past. Because in the past, there used to be more kind of, you know, economic arrangements. But nowadays, based on her theory, there's so much more, you know, like that person's our confidant. And so I think there's more at stake, you know, that's the simple answer to that. You know, it's like I'm fear of being rejected because, you know, it's almost like we put so much stock into our, you know, like that, and maybe the ideal of the relationships.
Sure.
I don't know.
The ideal, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Is that fair to our partner?
You know, that's
to
a good
to
question.
expect them to be like our confidant, our therapist, our best friend, our sexual partner, and among many other things. Sometimes we're parents.
I mean, no, like we shouldn't, our well-being and our self-worth should not be based on our partner. But you know what? My partner is sometimes my therapist, my wife. She's my confidant, she's my best friend, she's my lover. So in a way, I rely on her for all that, and vice versa, and it's awesome. But I still have my own work. I still see my own therapist, I do my own meditation. Like, I am not giving her my self-esteem and be like, here's my self-esteem. It's your responsibility, right?
For sure. I think that's really one big takeaway that I've learned over however long it's been my own work and then the podcast as well, is like, it's no one else's responsibility to make us happy, to fulfill our self-esteem. And you pointed out self-worth. Self-worth and value is so important to come from ourselves that I even wrote down. So besides, okay, I won't even like set you up with a softball there.
Yeah.
Where do you find your self-worth?
Yeah, great question. Man, killer questions, Dave. That's why your podcast is so good.
Oh, thank you. I'm trying to get better at receiving compliments. I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, no, for real. We said this in the elevator, but this podcast is awesome. So good stuff. And so it made me forget your question.
Where do you find self-worth?
Yeah. The first answer is meditation. So in a way, that was my first path into recovery, into feeling better in my own skin, was meditating. Because when I stopped using drugs, I had all this anxiety. It's like, what do I do with this? And so it was meditation. And on that, I feel like I have, some degree of comfort, some days more than others, right? Within my own skin. And so I'm better able to show up in a relationship, and I'm more likely to get my needs met. I'm more likely to have a vibrant relationship because, I'm feeling better about myself, and then my own therapy too. I mean, I've had obviously I wouldn't be a therapist if I didn't have my own issues. Right?
Sure, every coach needs a coach.
For sure. So I would say meditation, therapy, and then on top of that, I know it's weird, but I get fulfillment from my relationship, from being seen, from being in an authentic relationship. I have more confidence because I don't worry that my wife's in it 100% and vice versa.
Because you know where you stand.
Yeah, because I know where I stand, I know where my wife stands. So I don't have to worry about the strength of our connection. So I have more confidence in my day-to-day life because I'm not spending resources thinking about that.
Yeah, and I think that's a big point of Esther Perel too, is we only have a certain number of emotional resources, mental resources, physical resources that we can expend every day. And that's why rest is so important. And when we talk about authentic relationship, how does authenticity help us get what we want without manipulation?
Oh man, gosh. Yeah.
We're just getting started here.
Yeah, this is so key. And this is what I help couples with. Don't lead with the anger, because the anger is protecting something. Pause, take a deep breath, and share what is real, what is authentic. There's a big difference between, gosh, you always go out with your friends. Every night you're going out with your friends. What's the deal? Between, when you go out with your friends, all this, I miss you. I feel lonely sometimes sitting at my house, my apartment alone without you. That's authentic. That's also known as vulnerability. So instead of the anger, pause, take a breath, and reach for what is underneath the anger, and share that.
Sure, I believe, well, that lands with me a lot because I always felt like a quick answer was the right answer. And what I've learned is it's totally okay to take a moment and actually get to the real root of the issue internally with yourself before you say what you impulsively want to say, which can kind of ignite the fire in somebody else as well. And so I built it a habit of just delaying my response just a little bit, because maybe a year down the road when we reminisce on that fight, we're not going to think about, oh, well, Dave, you paused for 5 seconds after I asked you that question, or after I told you I was going out with my friends for the night. Well, nobody's going to remember that. They're just going to remember how you made them feel. I think that's a Maya Angelou quote. And they'll remember how they made you feel, and then they'll also, maybe in this case, we're talking about going out with your friends, carry some resentment along the way of how inauthentic your response was if it was straight to anger.
Yeah, good point.
And another reason why anger resonates with me too is, as the challenger personality type, our instinct is to go to anger. And you as the achiever personality type, it's more heart-centered, you know? When I say the word success, what does that mean to you, now that we're talking about the achiever?
Yeah, success. Well, it is having ample resources for my family. And I know this is going to be oversimplistic, but I know when I've been successful, so I guess in a way this is financial, is I can take my family on a week-long skiing trip and not have to worry. You know, like I'm not there yet, but that's like, you know, success for me is kind of like, I learned this from my dad too. It's being able to provide for my family. And success in a way too is also providing emotionally for my family. And that's one thing I want to do different in my family. My dad's great, but he was pretty cut off from his emotions. That's where I got it. I hope he doesn't listen. If he listens and made it this far, I would be really surprised.
Same here. I don't think my dad's listened to a single episode, but he's a lot like that. You know, and when we were talking about authentic earlier, your answer to that question of success, being an achiever, is very authentic, and you're allowed to want to be a provider for your family. If that's one of your goals, then I say, hell yes, go for it. Because I love to ski as well. I'd love to be able to take my daughter on a week-long ski trip as well. My motivation is different from yours. We have different personality types. We have different upbringings. We have a different life experience. So understanding more about you, kind of relating PACT or the Enneagram or self-awareness and discovery to a friendship and to a professional relationship, I understand that. I get it. I totally get it. When we talk about the achiever personality type and when you first discovered it, how much did you resonate with it? How much did you relate?
When I was first reading about it, it resonated a lot because I'm pretty engrossed in my business and, you know, marketing myself as a couples therapist, marriage counselor. And a lot of it too, I think it said that we sometimes seek esteem from the outside. And I know for myself, like, you know, when I have, you know, when I get paid for the day, or, you know, my bank account is looking pretty nice, it's almost like a dopamine rush for me. I know that sounds, you know, kind of like shallow, but, you know, it's for real. It's like, okay, this makes sense, you know, of why, in a way, I feel like I'm really driven, like helping couples and learning about couples therapy, learning about relationships. Like, it's my passion. Like, I'm jamming podcasts. I'm like jamming your podcast in my car, like other podcasts about helping people, audible books. So it resonated a lot with me. And I think some of it too, like this, like the dark side is something like grandiosity. Is that true?
I would say that being seen as a success is one of the dark sides.
Okay, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
And that can come in a lot of different ways. But I think that the motivation that you're talking about for success is on the healthy end of the spectrum, because you're doing it to provide for your family. You're not doing it for outside validation. You're doing it because you find value and self-worth in the work of serving others through couples counseling. And I think that's a big differentiating factor when we're talking about self-awareness, self-worth, and being more authentic in a relationship, which all have so much to do with each other. Agree?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, okay, well, thanks for that validation. I appreciate that.
It's a very empathic statement. I like that.
It makes me feel good.
I hope so. I mean, we're in a feel-good kind of a community where we're non-judgmental around here as much as we possibly can be. But driving yourself so far and going after success to provide for your family you can get on the edge of burnout or on overwhelm. How do you recharge and reset?
That really resonated to me because sometimes I'm seeing couples in the evenings, Saturdays, and it's like, you know, I kind of need to reorient this a little bit, but I think a lot of it's saying no. You know, like understanding that I have, like we mentioned Esther Perel, finite resources, and sometimes I need to block my schedule. Sometimes I need to say no to maybe doing this workshop, or say no to, you know, whatever it is.
A random podcast interview.
A random podcast, but this is cool. You know, this one dude, Dave Glazer. Oh, wait, actually.
I heard you weren't invited to happy hour anyways, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going, so I have extra time, so.
One of the greatest things that I've loved about getting to know achievers is their self-deprecating humor.
Okay.
Is that a staple in your repertoire?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, and I share like with couples, like, because I feel like I'm sometimes more of like a personal coach or like a sponsor. Like I share the dumb shit that I do in my relationship, you know, and it's kind of nice that we can laugh about it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I shared a little bit earlier about like, hey, I'm sensing something in your body language. Do you want to talk about it? Did I make you uncomfortable with that? Well, I'm very forthright, and I'm very I'm transparent when I'm asked a question, but I'm also aiming to be vulnerable without oversharing. As if we want to talk about Brené Brown and her floodlighting effect that you have. When you said earlier, did you lose your audience? Well, you got to be aware of that. Like. I was being transparent and vulnerable for a moment, and I didn't overshare. I simply just set a boundary and noticed a body language change, and I asked about it, you know, and maybe I wasn't as compassionate as I could have been.
Yeah.
Because I do some dumb shit all the time.
Okay.
I know that Esther Perel's talked a lot about extramarital affairs and how the presence of a third person can be good for a relationship in the kind of the biological, psychological, subconscious way of like, we need to fight when there's competition. We need to go after what we want when there's competition. I think she calls it the rule of the third or something like that. In Mating in Captivity. It's a really good book. So in self-disclosure, which is what we were talking about here on the podcast, I don't generally talk about my relationships. One, my partner is not an active participant in the podcast. I haven't necessarily...
Interesting.
There's two ways that you can think of that.
Okay.
One, invite her on as a co-host, a co-pilot, a partner in crime, which is a good place for a partner to be. Not necessarily needing emotional needs met through my partner, but it'd be nice to share a project.
Yeah, for sure.
That's one option.
Yeah.
And then two, simply just listening and supporting from a cheerleader standpoint. Those are two ways that that we were alluding to yet. That partner's not involved yet.
Yeah, well, you can always use it for your own free therapy. You know, like have like another relationship counselor on. So,
do you know any good ones?
Yeah, I do. And guys, can you tell my girlfriend by how she's wrong here?
Oh gosh, like before we hit record, I was saying that this is not my therapeutic process of like bringing a relationship experts onto the podcast and like, hey, this is the shit that's going on in my life. I've done it before, and I don't know how well it's come off yet, but the fewer and farther between that I do that, the better it is, I think, for our relationship. Because I'm not looking for a freebie here. But I do get a hell of a lot of value out of our conversations.
Yeah, awesome.
So let's go back to authenticity to get what we want in a relationship. To me, as a challenger, I always go to like controlling and possessive and manipulation as like my three triggers. So to me...
Like the triggers that your partner will do that triggers you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm getting away from the word trigger because... that reminds me of like tiptoeing around a former relationship or just like not having the authentic conversation because I am tiptoeing around the real issues in the relationship, and that's not healthy for me. But what I'm understanding about myself is how to respond when I am feeling the urge to be passive aggressive, which is a response to those triggers. So I've just eliminated that behavior from my life.
The passive aggressiveness?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think it was self-destructive and sabotaging relationships for me. So now I just take that extra pause and I say, you know what? I'll be better than I used to be in this moment and not say what I initially wanted to say. I'll actually give it some pause and say what I truly feel about it.
Yeah, that, sort of like, lights me up inside. Like, that's it.
No, is that it? Is that
for real? That's it.
Is that the golden nugget I've been searching for so long?
Yeah, that's right there. I'm also trained with Terry Real in the relational life therapy, RLT. But one of the sort of adages or axioms, and however you want to say it, is choose your door B. So when that initial door A, the knee-jerk reaction, the passive aggressiveness comes up, pause and say something like, Dave, choose something more relational. And then that's it. And like, choose your door B is saying how you really feel. But there's still, that's not the 100% surefire solution to everything, because they could, say no or disagree. You, in a way, have to let go of outcome because you're taking care of your side.
I think that's a very big life lesson that I've needed to learn, is letting go of attachment of the outcome because I can't control it anyways. So back to the authenticity to get what you want in a relationship felt, when I read it, very manipulative to me. Is it based on intentions of the authenticity to make it not manipulative at all?
Well, I would think maybe like intentions, maybe like just empathy for your partner. Like if I'm sharing anything that pops up to my head and I'm just going to barf it all over my partner, there's a good chance I'm not going to be heard. There's a term for that too. It's unbridled self-expression. If I'm just going to say, I have a right to share whatever comes to me whenever I want to, then that doesn't work. That's a losing strategy. And so going back to knowing your audience, if you want to call it that, if you want to call it empathy, but basically it's be real, but also know, how is this what I'm about to say going to land? But still have a difficult conversation. A lot of it is how you say it, and I don't know, I sometimes get off on tangents. I don't know if I answered your question.
It was definitely the place that I wanted to go, because I think that the word authenticity is so misunderstood. That authenticity could be misunderstood as complete transparency, which is what you're talking about, the unbridled self-expression. That's not compassionate at all. That's not having grace for your partner. That's not treating them like an equal. It's treating them like you're the most important person in the room. And that's unfair. So the word authenticity is really this true search that we're on. Is like, is it complete 100% honesty all the time, full-on transparency? Or is vulnerability with transparency the best route? Or is it vulnerability which you can share your point without full transparency? Which is where I come from a lot of the point of like...
Yeah, give me an example of that.
If I were to say, I feel most connected with you when XYZ. That's being very vulnerable without actually being like transparent of, say, like, you're not meeting my needs. This is what I'm thinking about in my own head. My needs aren't getting met in this way, da 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 da. As opposed to like, I'm going to share something vulnerable with you if I have your permission to do so. Do you have the emotional bandwidth to handle that right now?
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
Like,
not just dumping. You're like ask
right.
first. Yeah.
And I can understand that because like our lives are so full all the time, and we don't have infinite resources. We've talked about that multiple times today. I'm not asking for permission to tiptoe around the issue. Hey, we have things to talk about. Do you have the emotional bandwidth to handle that right now, or would you like to pick a better time? And that allows us a connection. When I say that, like it deepens the connection of like mutual respect and self-awareness and understanding where my partner's at. So if I'm sharing something vulnerable, that to me doesn't have 100% unbridled self-expression, transparency included in it. One, that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of emotional bandwidth of both you and your partner, and then you might not even be talking about the real issue at hand. I feel most connected with you when we do this together, we do that together, or when I hear from you once throughout the day. Something like that.
Yeah, and I would like for you to reach out to me more.
Yeah.
You know, and on a request.
And I believe that that's authenticity at its core. But applying it and practicing it is a lifelong pursuit.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that, I agree with you 100%, that is authenticity at its core. And that's, you know, right on. Like if someone in my office, when people say exactly what you're saying in my office, it's almost like we can all take a deep breath. It's like, you know, we're being authentic, we're sharing what's real. And from my perspective, those are awesome moments. And I had another thought, but you know, I smoked a lot of pot in high school, so I forget stuff. Don't smoke pot, kids.
Before the brain was completely formed.
Exactly, before my prefrontal cortex was completely developed.
Oh, we were talking about resting and recharging, and it's important for you to say no. And no is a healthy word a lot of the times, even with your partner. So how do we say no in an authentic and respectful way to our partners so that we can get our rest, recovery, and our needs being met?
Yeah, so I would say the more you can come up with a win-win situation in your relationship, the better. And so, for example, if my wife comes home and she says, and I'm more of an introvert, she said, hey Jason, we're gonna go happy hour with some friends. I don't drink either, so I mean, I still don't mind going to the bars, but it's not number one on my list, right?
I can relate to that.
Yeah, and it's been a rough day. I can still do something like, gosh, you know, I don't want to go, babe, but how about this? You know, this Friday, we are going to go watch your favorite horror movie that you've been dying to see, right? I don't like horror movies, my wife does, and so in a way I still say no. I mean, I know this may sound a little inauthentic, but what I'm getting at is to a place where you guys can both have a win-win situation, you know, because sometimes if it's no, that's still good and you could still be fine with no, but get to a point in your relationship where, like I was saying, that you can do a win-win. I mean, another way too is just, you know, share what's real. You know, like, gosh, you know, I'm really tired. Like, I just can't do it. I mean, I know that's kind of a simple answer to your question, but a lot of times people get into, couples that I found get into tit for tat, or
keeping score.
Yeah, keeping score, or like winning and losing. I'm gonna do this. I don't care how you feel about that. In the end, you both end up losing.
That's true. Yeah.
And so just kind of get to a way where it's not tit for tat. You are coming up with win-win situations.
So how would the other person in this particular scenario find that the Friday night movie date, just the two of you, is a win when maybe your extroverted wife wanted to go out with her friends and share that with you? Because now on Friday night, the friends aren't involved. So how does our partner view that as a win?
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, I would have to, like, no. I mean, a movie could still kind of be a win for me, right? Because I get to avoid the happy hour, right?
And the crowds.
And the crowds.
Yeah, which is really hard for an introvert.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, ideally, the more that I know what can make my partner move, I know what my partner wants, and the more I can speak to that, you know, ideally it would be like, well, how about this? I'm going to call up your best friends and I'm going to organize a dinner date. That would be something better. You know, maybe we could do it during the day when I'm not stressed out.
Sure. Or hosting it at your home.
Yeah,
is that something that's a good compromise?
Yeah. So that would be a great. So thanks, Dave. My own relationship advice here. Because you called me out. You were like, a movie is not going to do it for your extroverted life.
However, let me actually play devil's advocate to my own advice or my own question. What do you think about this? Like, because a movie where you're picking something that is her favorite thing, but it's not your favorite thing, actually become more intimate for the two of you and fill her love bank even more than, say, like a happy hour out night with mutual friends?
Yeah. Wait, so can you say that again?
Yeah, of course. So you're taking the effort to finding something that's very special to her, which is a horror movie.
Yeah.
Not so special to you.
Yeah.
And you get to do it together, which is a little bit more intimate, more connection possible there than a happy hour with mutual friends. So would that be, if it's kind of thought of differently, could that be more of a win for the two of you?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, I know my wife, this is, you know, like her personality. She loves being around people. And if I, I just gave me a good idea. I'm going to go home and be like, you know what? Next weekend, dear, we're going to have a dinner party at her house. Oh, she would be stoked, for sure.
Is she the hostess with the mostest? Does she cook everything, or do you cook?
Yeah, I cook, because being an introvert, cooking is a way to avoid interaction.
You can have your back turned, but yet still be involved, right? Because you're cooking over the stove.
Exactly. But I still like talking with people. Obviously, I'm a therapist, you know, like I enjoy connecting, but, you know, that's just...
It's in a quieter environment. So I don't know if we've ever really talked about the introvert-extrovert dynamic on the podcast in a relationship sense. So let's dive, if you got the time, let's go there.
Yeah.
Okay, so introverts really do enjoy a quieter environment. They prefer more recharge time than an extrovert needs. Introverts, contrary to popular belief, they still do love social interaction. They just have a capping point, 100%, right?
100%.
And where is your cap? Like, I can't relate. I'm an extrovert.
Yeah.
Can you tell?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah.
So where's your top line amount of social interaction as an introvert?
Well, I'll throw an ideal. If we get to a party and 30 minutes, we say hello, we have some small talk. Again, I enjoy that. I enjoy people. That's why I'm a therapist. But if we get in 30 minutes and my wife says, hey, you know what, we have to leave, I'm not going to be disappointed.
I can hear that as well. So on the flip side, as an extrovert, let's say that same party is on a Saturday night after a busy as hell week, and I've been up late a couple nights in the week. If my men's groups fall in the same week, I'm fried by the end of the week. So that Saturday night, if my partner says, hey, after half an hour, we actually have other plans, it's a quiet dinner date at Jason's place, I'm gonna be like, oh hell yeah, let's get out of this wild, crazy, loud party, even as an extrovert, and go recharge at a dinner party at somebody's house. That's actually a really good place for me to recharge, but still get some social interaction and some important intimacy amongst friends.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. So how do you handle that dynamic, being an extrovert, and maybe your date, your partner is more introverted?
This comes from respect for other people and not necessarily knowing them entirely. Along with giving up passive-aggressive behavior, I've also working on giving up assumptions as well. Like assuming that I know what my date or partner wants out of the evening. Yeah. So if we're in the car on the way to the party and we're talking about our work week, because we don't live together or we're not dating multiple times a week, we just see each other once a week, we're going to have the conversation about, how was your week? Oh my gosh, it was just so long. I traveled. Oh my gosh, I recorded 4 podcast episodes. I'm really fried on talking to people. Well, that gives us both an out after 30 minutes into the party, right? So this is where communication is key between you and your partner, and then grace and compassion comes into it over time. Like, that's not a first week dating conversation, for sure. Nor is going to a party with your friends a first or a second date kind of a good idea. Like, we don't necessarily want to meet each other's friends in a big party situation too early on, because that's not going to help us build the foundation of a relationship that we're looking for. So to answer your question, like a long-winded answer to your question, I have to understand my partner and what they prefer, because in the beginning we're just talking about preferences. We're not really talking about needs per se. I would prefer to leave this party at X time.
Cool.
You know, and we can talk about it.
Yeah, that's great. You know, when you were sharing that, something came to mind. This practice called leading with empathy. So if my wife, so say we're at a party, and my wife comes up to me and says, Jason, I know you want to go, but it would be great if we could stay another hour. For me, it's like, okay, great. You know why? Because she saw me. She was able to empathize with me. And so, because of that nice gesture, I'm cool with staying. You know, and so I know that's a small point, but it's really important for people in relationships to do. Convey that you see your partner, because that can go a long way.
I like it. I like it a lot, and I can see it. I can see it occurring more and more in my life as well. The more, I'm not going to say mature because that's the wrong word, but the more I let go of that control of the outcome, I just don't play that highlight reel or that movie reel in my head before the date comes. So if we have dinner plans scheduled out and one of us has a hell of a week and they call up the other and say, hey, you know what, I still want to see you, but how about we do it in instead of out?
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
I think that's a great example of leading with empathy that people would really benefit and relate to.
Yeah, and that's being authentic, right?
Yeah, I actually would thank the person in that situation of like, thank you so much for actually sharing what you wanted and for understanding where I was coming from too. Like, you didn't cancel the date, you just rearranged it a little bit, and we can put the other plans on the back burner for another time. The restaurant's not going anywhere, right? Unless you are. Are you going anywhere? No, I'm scared. No.
Don't leave me. Please don't leave me. Yeah, so leave that part out. You know.
No, actually,
the full transparency.
That was unbridled self-expression, wasn't it? My favorite comedian is named Mike Birbiglia, and he's telling a story in his stand-up. He asks his girlfriend, "What do you fear most?" And she says, "Well, I fear that you'll meet somebody else and you'll leave me." What do you fear most, Mike? Bears. Like, that's the
great.
difference
That's
between transparency and vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
He was transparent about being afraid of bears, but that's not vulnerable, like his girlfriend, and that's why it didn't work out.
Yeah, for sure. Great point. I like that. I like that distinction you made. Yeah.
We can learn a lot from the access to other people's lives. Like, if comedians are sharing their lives on stage and we can watch it on YouTube, we have so much access there. But we can learn a lot from other people's scenarios as well, like yours. And self-disclosure here on the podcast, self-disclosure in your counseling sessions. And then maybe not so much my self-disclosure, but...
So how's your dating life going?
That's a fantastic segue, because I know you're poking the bear there a little bit about my transparency and my self-disclosure.
Yeah.
I get it. That's really funny. On that note, Jason, if your message resonates with somebody today, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
So my website is coloradorelationshiprecovery.com, and you can scope it out, read the blog. A lot of stuff that we talked about here, I've wrote about it in my blog at some point. So from my perspective, I think it's a good resource. And also too, with a colleague of mine, I'm doing a workshop November 10th. So not this Sunday, but next Sunday. And don't worry, the Broncos aren't playing. There's a bye.
Thank God we need the bye. Yeah, we need the bye so bad.
So we're doing a workshop for couples in recovery. So in a way, this is kind of two of my interests, which is couples therapy and addiction recovery. And then how that shows up in couples is November 10th at the Denver Family Therapy Center in Wheat Ridge. And so I'm pretty excited about that.
Good. Share that information and that link with us so that we can get it out to our community. And if there's one thing that we didn't touch on today, briefly covered, or that you want to expand on more, what would that be?
Well, I guess I just want to reiterate something that an example you shared about the vulnerability. and kind of reiterating going through door B, not leading with, in a way, closeness is not sharing whatever you're feeling, however you want to feel it. In a way, vulnerability, authenticity, it takes a little bit more time to locate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I feel statements are great too. I know I feel statements can get kind of a bad rap, and that's kind of cheesy therapist stuff. But in a way, to say an I feel statement, it takes time because you have to notice what you feel. Right? But if you lead with an I feel statement, you are more likely to get your point across. And so I just want to reiterate the importance of being authentic, of being real, and of being vulnerable.
For the sake of your relationship.
For the sake of your relationship.
Now, future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so for the sake of, for you too, right? Because if we bottle everything in, or we just have, our only communication is anger outbursts or passive aggressiveness, it's not good for us and for our health.
Yeah, it takes us out of alignment, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then it starts to put stress in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start to worry and overthink and self-sabotage, and then
for sure,
create untrue stories in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Nope. Well, thank you very much, Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. It was awesome.
That was a hell of a lot of fun.
That was.